Hello, everyone, and welcome. Um, I know I am late in being back. Um, I apologize. I did not have a voice last week, and then I had some technical difficulties today to be back here. But we are back with week 7 and 8 of my fall-ish writing workshop. Wrong way. Ta-da! I do apologize for the cough. I'm still trying to get over not having a voice and all of this stuff, but I didn't want to miss another week of this because we're already behind. But with this, we are back on track with being back on week 7 and 8. So as a quick overview, as you can see on your screen, we have completed weeks 1 through 6. And if you are there, if you have stayed with me this entire time, we have gone over the goal settings, your plot structure. Now, who can remind me what the plot structure is? It is your bones of your story. Then you have your character development. They make your readers feel. They're the nervous system. The setting and the world building is the makeup, the skin. It's the clothes that you wear. The point of view and the voice is the voice. The voice of mine that keeps going in and out. If you're watching this later throughout the years, whenever you watch this, I do apologize because I'm going to sound rough in this week. And then we went over dialogue and pacing. All of those should have given you the basic bones you need to start your story. Because today we are going to be talking about conflict and tension and then going into drafting your first half. Because at the end of this week, today is October 29th. At the end of this week, November begins. And that means we are going into the National Writing Month, where people will be having writing sprints and writing as much as they can. And so if you have been following along in the last 7 weeks, you should be at a point where you can start drafting on Friday. Because you know what? I can also start drafting on Friday because I have been following along with this own writing course. So let's get into week 7. Let me just go quickly to where week 7 is on my screen. I apologize. I will admit, I'm not 100% health-wise, so again, I apologize for all the coughing. I will try and mute if I can stop the cough ahead of time. So, week 7 is about conflict and tension. And in this section, we will be covering understanding what conflict is and creating tension, and then a quick Q&A and homework before we go into week 8. So I have my notes. So, conflict and tension is like the push and pull of your story. It's what keeps people sort of almost gripped into the, oh my gosh, is my main character going to die? Are they going to survive? Are they going to live? Are they going to die? It's the will they, won't they? It's the push and pull, the magnet that keeps the two character enemies to lovers sort of gravitating around each other. It is the blood of a compelling story. Okay, so it is your blood, people. Conflict and tension is the blood. It is the blood of your body. It's the blood of your story. It's the will they, won't they. It gives it life. And so there are different types of conflict. And I'm going to go, under understanding conflict, we're going to go through the different types of conflict. You have internal and external. And this internal is, as a lot of times you see more internal conflict with romance stories. Where it's the internal, I don't know if I'm good enough for you, or I don't know if they're good enough for me, or I can't be with this person because of X, Y, and Z. It's a lot of things that are internally facing that stop the main character from being with the person they want. Is that always romance? but a lot of times romance does have internal conflicts. Another one is external. External conflict, that's like Harry Potter, where Harry was being hunted by Voldemort. That's Hunger Games, where she was in the conflict was the fact that she was in the Hunger Games. It's an outside force putting conflict onto your main character. In my story, Elendil, her conflict is the fact that a war is going on. That's not internal to her. That's an external force that's sort of coming on to her. In Amatry's magic, the external force is the cult. It's not an internal fight to herself. The conflict is external. So, and there's many other types of conflict, but those are like some of the main internal or external. Um, well, another one for romance could be like a relationship type conflict if the whole point of the story is the fact that their relationship isn't working. But for more action based, it's internal, external for the most part. And then building your stakes. What's at risk with this tension? What is at risk with whatever's going on? Why are your readers caring about whatever conflict this person is going through? Is it an escalating type of conflict? Does it stay stagnant the entire time? Do the stakes raise? What is the reason your readers are going to want to read along and understand and help your main character gets through whatever conflict they're going through? So when you're building your conflict in your story, the blood of the body of the story, you need to remember the type of conflict you're building. And then also when you think of stakes, think of what's at risk. And sometimes for me, I think why do you care? Why do I care this is happening to your character? What's at stake? What's the risk? What is keeping me connected to your character, to your book? And then moving on to create techniques to creating tension. A lot comes with creating tension. There's a lot of factors that can go into creating tension. Um, again, I apologize to my viewers. I am getting over a small little cold, so I will be coughing. I apologize. So pacing and structure can help build tension and conflict. And that way it means how are you structuring your sentences? How are you structuring that chapter? How are you structuring the way that they talk about the conflict and tension? How is the transitions between the scenes? Is it foreshadowing? Are you hinting at a future conflict? Is it when you structure the scene, are you having someone whisper under their breath? And that sort of gives a hint that, oh, hey, something's wrong with that person because they're whispering under their breath about something. Does your character notice someone else grit their teeth? Does your character notice a clipped tone that someone is talking to them with? Does your character notice someone is wringing their fingers? Are they like biting their lip? What is going on in your scene that is building the tension? Famously in of course I forget the movie. The Marvel movie with Captain America when he's in the elevator. And as more and more people get into the elevator, you notice that Captain America is noticing something is going on. And to us, the viewer, we're just like, oh, but those are all people who work for S.H.I.E.L.D. But at this point, he understands that there's a mole. And all these people are sort of like piling in and getting around him. And some people are looking nervous. Some people are fidgeting. He notices someone is sweating. And these are all things that help him realize something's happening. Something is about to happen in this elevator. And he even says, before we get started, does anyone want to get out? And so this is Captain America's way of saying he notices the tension that is in this elevator and he's addressing it. So that all came in with the pacing of that scene. There were foreshadowing parts of the way certain people in that elevator had acted on missions that Captain America didn't agree with. There were subtle threats and subtle like things that were sort of passed around. So when you are writing your story, when you are drafting it out, when you are putting this conflict and tension in, make sure you are planning for these little foreshadowing bits, these little subtle threats. Does your main character I had a excuse me, sorry. In Omnitrix Magic 2, I wrote a scene where the villain was talking to another character, and I had them say a line that could be misconstrued as the fact that they were the villain. But it was on purpose, but it was a subtle thing. It went over the main character's head at the point because in their mind, they weren't expecting the person to say what they did. But it was like when you watch crime shows, and it's called like guilty knowledge. When someone says something they're not supposed to know, only the villain would know this, or only the villain would say something. These are different little techniques and things you should keep in mind when you're working on your story and building the conflict and you're building the tension. So, to the people who are watching, if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. I will try and assist and answer any questions as I can, because we are on week 7 of our 12-week writing course. As I give your homework, and it's a really simple homework. All these homeworks have been pretty much simple. It is write a scene with clear tension. Just write a scene with tension. It could be, and keep in mind everything I spoke about in this part, where is it external conflict, internal conflict? What is the pacing of the scene? What is the transitions? What foreshadowing are you putting into it? Is your character struggling with emotions in their mind, or are they struggling with a bully at their job? Are they struggling with a horrible person on the street who has road rage? What is your character dealing with? But as you are working on this scene, just take this chance to write a scene with clear tension. And I'm going to stay here for a second and see if anyone has any questions. As I get us started to go back on week 8. Because I missed, I did miss last week because I did not have a voice. I feel like I have a voice now. People have said my voice has gotten better. But I look horrible when I cough. I apologize. So, welcome back to the more people who are joining, because we're now going to go into week 8. And this is the week I should have been talking about this week. That doesn't mean week 7 was not important. It was very important. It was very important because all of these weeks are building upon each other. Everything that we're talking about from week 1 has built upon to everything you're doing for week 8. So, as a review, week 1, we set our goals. Did everyone set their goal? Week 2, we went over plot and structure, your bones. It gives the house structure. It's the bones of the story. Your character development, that's your nerves. It makes you feel something. Pain, excitement, pleasure, whatever. That's your characters. Your setting and your world building, that's your makeup, that's your skin, that's your clothes. It looks pretty. What's the setting? What are we living in? That's the car you're driving. What are we talking about? Your point of view and voice, that's your voice. That's literally the tone of your story. How are people hearing it? How are they receiving it? Is it a good voice, bad voice, high pitch, low pitch, fast, slow? What are we doing? Pacing and dialogue. Sorry, dialogue and pacing. That is the speed of which people are going to receive your story. Conflict and tension. That's the lifeblood, the blood of your story, of your body. the water of your house, of your pipes, however you want to call it. And now that gets us to week 8, where you would have taken everything from week 1 to week 7, or technically week 6, because I know we just talked about week 7. But you would have taken everything you've learned in the past couple of weeks, and you are now ready to start drafting your first half of your book. And by drafting, I mean writing it. We're going to start writing. Now, I don't expect everyone to have their first half of their book written by next week. I don't. But I expect you to start. I expect you to have it pretty much outlined, because in week 1, week 2, and week 3, we have been working on outlines. And those outlines should have built upon each other. You had your plot and structure outline. You had your character outlines. You had your setting and world building outlines. Those are your homeworks from those weeks. Those are creating the story for week 8. Your voice, your pacing and dialogue, your conflict and tension, that all comes into as you're writing it. Those are things that sort of happen as you're writing the story. So now we're in week 8. In week 8, we are talking about drafting your first half. And so today I'm going to give you just some tips and techniques of what you can do to start drafting your first half. So the focus of this session is breaking down the first half of your book, and I'm just giving you drafting tips because I really want you guys to enjoy this part. Writing your story should be the most fun you're going to have. You're bringing your characters to life. You're bringing the story to life. This is something that has never existed before. And it does because of you. No matter how many words you get on the paper, no matter how many words you can get in a writing session, no matter how many hours it takes you, you're doing it. You're actually going to start writing. And I want you guys to make this promise to yourself as you're working on this, that you are not going to compare how many words you have, how long your story is to anyone else. You are going to write what you want to be on your paper. Don't compare yourself to anyone else, because the drafting part, sometimes we can get caught up in what someone else is doing, how other people are able to write more than we are, how they're able to spend more time writing, or how they can get more words out. And we're not going to focus on that. What we're going to focus is on what we can control, and what we can control is ourselves. So, with that said, let's get into drafting the first half. So basically, the first half, you're going to have Act 1 and part of Act 2. Most books is Act 3. Beginning, middle, end, setup, action, rising action, falling action. So in this next week, you're going to focus on the setup and the rising action. This is, in my opinion, beginning of the book is probably the most important part of the book. The ending is great. But sometimes a lot of people don't finish because if the beginning doesn't get to them, if the middle doesn't draw them in, they're not going to get to the amazing end that you have planned. You need every single word that they're reading to be worth it. And so a lot of times, if it takes 2 or 3 chapters for your readers to get into your book, you've lost them. If someone doesn't know they have to get through 4 chapters or 5 chapters for the story to matter, either they're going to skip those 4 chapters and go straight into the part where people say, oh, it gets good at chapter 6. You don't want that. You want everything that they're reading to draw your characters in. So when you've set up your world, when you set up your characters, when you set up your plot, what is the beginning like? How is your story starting? What is drawing the people in? If this was your 5-paragraph paper to your school, to like if you had a school work done, what's your thesis statement? What's the subject line? What is drawing people in? So you want to give your readers a clear sense of your book in the first couple of chapters. You want to introduce the rules, the expectations, the genre of the world in the first couple of chapters. You don't want someone to get halfway through the book and then the book goes left. You're just like, oh, this was completely different than I anticipated. Like, you don't want to be 10 chapters in and then the whole twist comes out and you're just like, oh, we're in an alien world this entire time? Because some people love that and some people hate that. So you want to make sure that you are setting up the world and the rules of the book so people know what to expect as they're reading it. You want to make sure the main character is introduced. I have read some stories where the point of view jumps around and you really don't know who the main character is until halfway through the book, or who's the character you're actually supposed to care about or trust. So sort of, if that's the case, make sure the character you want them to follow is the character that they are connecting with, they're vibing with. Make sure some plot points are happening in the first couple in the setup in Act 1. Make sure there's some like crumbs getting hinted and thrown in there, so people are like, oh, I'm noticing things as early on. You want to make sure the first major plot point is thrown in the setup. You don't want the story to only get going in the second, third half of the book. You want people to be drawn in from every single sentence that they're reading. You want them drawn into it. And then we're going into Act 2, the rising action. And this is the part where the story really starts to take off, where like you go from the little flat line, and then Act 1 is the setup, and then now you're in the rising action. You're going uphill. You want to start developing the subplots. You want to start having the more complex obstacles come in there. That's where you start introducing more characters into the storyline. That's when, if this was like a heist movie, more people are sort of thrown in, more obstacles and unknown security parts come in. If this was a romance novel, the characters have like started liking each other. They may have gone on their first date, but the main character is feeling a little bit hesitant because of the guy's past or the girl's past. You want to start getting towards the middle part, the whole crux of the story. So you want to remember that you don't want to tell everything in the first half, because you want people to read the second half of the story. But you want to make sure that this is leading up, the lead up to the main huzzah of the book is worth it. That people are going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that just happened. Oh my, like the rest of this book is going to be amazing as they try to figure out, why did this character die? Or why did he lie to her? Or why did the guy steal the egg? Or whatever it was. You want them to be excited about that part. So make sure you're staying focused on the conflict and the stakes. Make sure that you have your character development. Oops, sorry, I'm skipping ahead. Now I'm giving you tips for drafting the first half. You want to stay focused on the conflict and the stakes. You want to stay focused on the storyline. I have a problem with sticking to my outline sometimes, because I'll start writing and then I will be like, oh my God, that's a great idea. Let me write that out. And then I'll write that idea and it's completely left of what my original plan was. And so then I get to the midpoint and everything that I've outlined goes away. And I always end up going back to the original outline because that was the one that I planned out. Stay focused. I'm not saying ignore the ideas, but before you scrap your original outline to follow the dancing idea that's coming down your head, stay focused on your original outline. Stay focused on your original draft, and then make a note of the idea, because maybe you might be able to fit it in later. Maybe it could grow and work. You can work it in differently into your story. But stay focused on your outline. Stay focused on your draft. Make sure that if you're showing character development, if your guy is a cheater, a habitual cheater in the beginning of the story, he can't change his ways by book 2. He needs to, by chapter 2. Character development has to happen gradually. No one has epiphanies really in real life and they've completely become a changed person. People struggle with the changes. People work to be better. People fight their habits. they fight to break habits. No habits are formed like no one decides one day I'm going to be a ballerina and the next day they're on point and they're principal. It doesn't happen that way. Development happens slowly, gradually, and you need to reflect. That needs to be reflected in your story with your characters. And make sure your balance of the scenes, of the pacing of the story matches. You want the pacing in the beginning to also match the pacing in the end. You don't want it to take 10, 15 chapters to set up the story and then everything is sort of wrapped up in one chapter at the end. If your whole story is like one book. I get that it's sometimes different if it's like a series or a trilogy, because not everything is always going to be wrapped up at the very end. But you don't want it to take 4 or 5 chapters, 10 chapters to explain for them to get into their problem and they're able to solve it in one line. Sometimes that doesn't really work. So you want to make sure the pacing of the story matches as you're starting it out. And I know this was a quick lesson because, again, I'm losing my voice as I talk, as you guys can tell. But I wanted to make sure we didn't miss these weeks because we were, again, about to go into NaNoWriMo on, I'm saying it wrong, but on Friday. And that is when we will start doing our writing sprints. I will be posting I'll be popping up on here at some times to have some writing sprints with you guys. But we're going into the drafting of the first half. And our next meeting will be Tuesday, November 5th, Election Day. We may be happy or sad that day. I apologize. But that is when we will be coming back to talk about, let's go back. What we're talking about for week 9. Week 9, we'll be doing our midpoint review and adjustments of basically of what you started outlining, what the drafting of the first half was. Because your homework for week 8 is to draft the first half. And again, I'm not expecting you to write, if you're planning a 1,500, if you're planning a 50,000 word book or 100,000 word book or 150,000 word book, I'm not expecting you to have 75,000 words written by next Tuesday. But I'm expecting to have a start. I'm expecting you to start it because I will be starting it. And I normally handwrite my first draft. So will I have 75,000 words written by next week? Absolutely not. I will break my hand if I do that. Will I have the beginning of a couple chapters figured out? Yes. Yes, I will. Because your book cannot get written if you don't write the words. So, to my faithful viewers who have been watching this entire time, does anyone have any questions? Feel free to drop it in the chat and I will respond. I'll give you a couple of moments to do that while I talk over just the next couple of weeks, because we are now going into week 9, 10, 11, 12. We have 4 more weeks left of this 12-week writing series. And we're getting closer and closer to having our drafts done of our work. Remember, as you're writing your book, you are writing your book, not someone else's. You're writing the words you want to read, not someone else's. Don't compare how many words you can write to someone else's. I used to do that. It does not help anyone else, but it does not help to compare yourself to anyone else. Write the story you want to read. That way you'll always enjoy it. And I want to thank you guys for joining me. I have had so much fun teaching these courses. I hope today was helpful. I do apologize for being late, technical difficulties, but I have gotten them figured out. So hopefully no more technical difficulties next week. So as always, I'm Andrea, and thank you for joining me.